we all know the business case for diversity. We all know, as we've just seen, we need top talent. So the point of this panel is not to outline for you yet again why we need these things. It's to use our panelists, who I will introduce in a moment, to help us to actually give some best practice, some really good advice on how to recruit, retain, retrain top talent. So let me introduce my panelists. So first of all, to my left, we have Catherine Wines, who's the non-executive director and co-founder of World Remit. Pip Jameson, who is the founder and CEO of The Dots. And Heidi Ridley, who is from Rosenberg Equities, AXA Investment Management. So I was mulling how to begin this, because we had a very interesting 3 pre-briefing calls. In fact, I didn't have a pre-briefing call with Pip because Pip was flying to and from New York. And what I loved about Pip's reply on her email was at the end of it, she says, delightfully dyslexic, excuse the typos. So for starters, that shows you a kind of cognitive diversity. And I think it's something that your organisation, The Dots, is really trying to encourage. So first of all, to you, Pip, how do you find great people who don't all look, sound, and think the same?
Yeah, I think it's really important, firstly, to kind of define diversity. A lot of times we talk about gender. I think really diversity is just building teams that reflect society as a whole. So gender is obviously important, ethnicity, sexuality, but it is also about the hidden diversities. So socioeconomic movement, we could end up with a team that looks very different, but actually have all been similar backgrounds. But also neurodiversity, which dyslexia touches on. So neurodiversity, has anyone heard the term neurodiversity? So brilliant, one person. So neurodiversity is dyslexia, autism, dyspraxia, ADHD, all if harnessed correctly has its own inherent superpowers. Is anyone in the room dyslexic by any chance? Okay, fun fact, 35% of entrepreneurs are dyslexic and 40% of self-made millionaires. So congratulations, it's a superpower. It also means, you should start thinking about hiring. If you're looking at innovation, for example, you should start thinking about hiring more neurodiverse talent. But to answer your question, I think firstly, in terms of actually how to make it happen from a hiring perspective, one, it has to start at the top. There has to be genuine intent. It can't be something that's managed by your HR or recruitment teams. It has to start from the top. Secondly, I would hire for values fit, not culture fit. So a lot of companies hire for culture fit. When you're trying to find culture fit, what tends to happen is you hire someone like yourself, someone that you can imagine yourself hanging out with, but that just leads to an homogenous workforce. The third thing that I think Google has done very well is they hire by committee. And this is a collection of diverse people coming together that assess a candidate. And the reason this is important is because we all have biases. It's just human nature. But if you hire by committee, you alleviate each other's biases. And I think the fourth thing, and this is a shameless plug, you have to widen the net. So what you're looking at, if you're going to the same HR manager, recruiters, or if you're going to LinkedIn, those are non-homogeneous platforms. So widen the net, hire for values, but please start it from the top is the best tip I can give you.
Heidi, we talked earlier about the fact that at Rosenberg Equities, you almost have an inverted pyramid in your senior leadership team. And you talk about a mosaic of cultures and ethnicities. Can you talk a little bit more about how you hire in terms of CVs? Because I remember that you have quite a unique approach.
Well, I would echo a lot of your comments. I think, they're a very shared view. In terms of diversity, it's a super important topic. It's super important for business. We've shown that it is directly linked to productivity, profitability, and all those things. And so it's important, but it requires a lot of effort in thinking outside of the box. And I think as Rosenberg Equities is a quant manager, and so we're incredibly unique, not only in the asset management space, but in the tech space in terms of our diversity. And it does go beyond gender, but 60% of our management team are women. And it's just been, even within the women, you've got married, unmarried, kids, no kids, different kinds of educational backgrounds, which I think are really critical. But if you look across the organization, we have people from representing 19 countries. And we really look for that broad, mosaic of backgrounds, experiences, skill sets, cultural upbringing, perspective. Even are you, more of an introvert, extrovert? You can guess which side of the coin I'm on. All of those things are very important. And so what we do, very similar, not a committee-based interview structure, but we do try to take a great cross-section of individuals to interview. We don't just have the individual interview with their team that they're going to be joining. We're looking for people to have different perspectives on what this person can bring to the table. And certainly I would, as CEO, I would rely on my team to assess the technical capabilities. So I rarely look at someone's CV. I might peek to see if they went to Berkeley, so I can say go Bears. But other than that, I don't really look at the CV. What I want to be sort of unfiltered when they come in the door. What I'm looking for is, who's this person? How do they think? What kinds of issues have they faced? How have they approached those issues? What are they looking for in a company? What are they looking for in an experience? And Rosenberg's also very flat, hierarchical structure. We're very collaborative and teamwork oriented. So it's important because this is a two-way commitment. So what I want to know is if someone is really interested in seeing their career progress in sort of a, lockstep movement. If I go from here, I become manager, then VP, then EVP, then, whatever your ladder is. We're not a great home for them because I can't really offer them that. It's not a bad thing to want. But it's a good thing to know. If that's something that you value, it's important for us to know that, and it's important for you to know that. And so, as a result, we have incredible tenure at the firm because we spend a lot of time up front making sure we have the right person and not necessarily the person that seems to be the perfect fit, but someone who brings something kind of different and special to the table.
Can I say, sorry, there's one thing what I love about you said there is tenure. I think a lot of times we're talking about diversity is great for business, innovation, profitability, but actually there's research that teams that reflect society are 43% happier and 45% more likely to stay with the business. So in this era of churn, if you're looking to retain talent, having diverse teams helps with that.
That's a perfect segue to Catherine. So I was saying that Pip was on a flight and Heidi was working from home. And so, you can already see some flexibility in working. And when Catherine and I spoke, she was actually on chemo. So, an amazing place to speak to me. She was incredibly lucid and gave me some brilliant points. And I just think it's an interesting place to start exploring employee support through difficult times, how to keep people, how to keep them motivated, engaged for the long term, and that idea of tenure. I'd love you to speak to that, Catherine.
First, if I can maybe support what you said about, culture fit. I think this culture fit thing, we've got to forget about it. That's really important, please, because you only recruit people in your own image if you do that. I think, about recruitment and retaining is about looking at people, about the organization. And, there are a lot of things which are happening in the UK, before I talk about health, but, for example, in the UK with the gender pay gap report, I think has done a lot to kind of highlight the problem that companies have. And I think it's really important to see what, as a company, we can do. It's about setting up at the top, but certainly with CEO, but as the organization as a whole, as to how you approach recruitment. Because too often, you just let the recruiters, the usual recruiters, to do their work. And they're going to take the easy route out. So you've got to force them to go outside their comfort zone and say, no, I want 50-50, CVs of the diverse community. So that's the one point I wanted to mention first. Yes, I think, more and more, having cancer has made me realize, that in this country, 1 in 2 persons is going to have cancer. So I certainly thought, I'm an employer, and when I stand and see the people working for us, probably 50% are going to be affected by this disease. It's a bit like an epidemic, and other disease, but this one is quite, kind of epidemic for the moment. And what do we do? And it has been a real eye-opener for me as to people's attitude, what they expected or not expect. And, sometimes people felt I should be at home resting. And, yes, I need to rest, but I also want to have as normal life as possible. I wrote an article about this, and because it's quite important in terms of my positivity, but also my contribution. You know, some people want to contribute. Yes, we have to adjust, but you know, at the end of the day, it makes sense. It makes financial sense for a business. If you have people who are going to go off sick for 12 months, then you've lost all that productivity, and then they probably won't be very happy themselves anyway because they feel they're not contributing anything. So, you know, making sure that you can talk to your employees, that you know how to support them, and also know how to deal with their problem is very important. And I think that really helps also the organization as to look at that you are a caring employer. And it's not just about caring, you know, let's not talk too much of the soft side, but it's about making financial sense in terms of your organization as well.
I think organizations have now become what a village was in the past. You know, they're now providing spiritual succor, self-worth, one's own, how one feels about oneself is very much tied up in our place of work. And maybe to you, Heidi, how do you marry the business and that need of individuals, Gen Z, millennials, for that kind of environment?
I think they're explicitly linked. At the end of the day, it's interesting because I think more and more we're associating with millennials or the next generation as wanting to have, you know, purpose. But the reality is I think we all want meaning to our work. I mean, I don't think anyone, you know, goes to work and doesn't think that they want to have a contribution and make a difference. And so I think as long as you acknowledge that, try to build it into your ecosystem, I think that's really important. We've worked very hard we were a founder-led organization by an individual 3 decades ago. And so what I really try to do over the last couple of years is really expand that mindset to, I want every employee to feel like they've got a fingerprint on the future of the organization, that we're co-creating that together. And everyone has that ability to contribute no matter where they are in the organization. If it's the receptionist who's got the very warm welcome to our clients, you know, all the way through, it's very critical that everyone feels that. And we try to, again, the village needs a chieftain, and that chieftain needs to value this and think it's important and demand it from everyone within the organization. And I think when you do that, it doesn't feel forced. It feels very natural. It's what people want. And you can really see people coalesce around, in our view, you know, difference is what makes the difference.
I think this would be a good opportunity to get the audience a bit involved. So I'm going to ask us to do a poll now. I'm painfully aware that we are 4 white women sitting up on stage here. And on Sunday evening, I went to hear Hillary Rodham Clinton and Chelsea Clinton speak about their new book, and it was moderated by Mary Beard. And so there again, it was 3 white women, and the audience felt to me predominantly white when I spoke to some of my BAME friends about it afterwards. So I'd like to put this poll to you, and then maybe we can discuss while you guys are inputting your answers. What is the estimated yearly UK pay gap for Black, Asian, and ethnic minority workers? A, 2.6 million. B will be 10.5 million. C, 3.2 billion. D, 4.1 billion. Okay, so we're thinking it's somewhere between the... Okay, yeah, very good. 3.2 billion. Oh. A few more coming in. Well, I gave it away then, didn't I? Yeah. 3.2 billion, everybody. What do we do about that? Pip, let's go to you.
Yeah, I mean, hiring diverse teams is one thing. Keeping diverse teams is another. Paying them correctly is another. I mean, it's a very complex issue. I think we just need to start being reticent of what we're doing. And again, it starts from the top. I think, you know, in the end, we have to build teams that are inclusive to everyone. And inclusivity is around paying people the right amount and matching people's salaries. So if you haven't yet ever asked in your organization what the pay gaps are, I think the first thing everyone has to do is actually go away and get the knowledge and see if there is a pay gap in your organization. That's the first point. Yeah. And is there one? Then you can take it to the next level. I mean, there's an amazing tech company in Shoreditch. There are about 200 people, and they literally found that there was one, and so the CEO literally just paid everyone, the women in the organization, he gave them all a pay rise, and anyone who was BAME in the organization, he gave them a pay rise, so then they had parity. But I think the most important thing is knowledge is power, so you've just got to work out what is your organization where it is now.
But with the pay gap report, we're not talking of just equal pay, because, you know, it's illegal actually to not pay the same pay, but this is about the fact that, you know, in our organization, we are more or less 50-50. We are quite diverse because of the type of business we are. You know, we're in the remittances, we work globally. But the problem is we still come in London, where a lot of our employees are engineers, and a lot of them are male and white, and therefore are paid more because of their skill, this particular skill. So there's work to be done there. And I think most companies probably found it quite shocking. Those who have to report, you know, anybody over 250 employees have to report now, probably didn't quite expect the outcome of this report. And I certainly recommend every company, to be frank, I'm very much a believer that every company should calculate and maybe report it, because then they really, you know, hit you in the face and say, oh, I thought we were better than that, you know, because so I think that type of report is really useful within an organization to realize that maybe you're not quite as good as you thought and you have work to do.
I wonder if, as a quant, I mean, we always say you can't manage it if you can't measure it. But I agree with you on the equal pay issue. But I wonder to some degree, because I see a lot of organizations where they tend to have the greater proportion of female sort of at the entry level positions, and then it sort of, you know, peters out as you get further to the top. And so then, you know, are people hiring in from the outside? And I think, you know, again, having a firm with, you know, a lot of people. I mean, I've been there 18 years, and I'm one of the younger, not younger by age, but by tenure within the firm. And so that becomes difficult because you've got a lot of homegrown. And my experience has been that typically in a homegrown situation, and you guys can nod if you agree or not, but you know, when you get a promotion, it's sort of always anchored to the job you had before. So it's sort of, you know, you've got this job, I'm going to give you a 10% increase for this promotion. Well, the promotion could be a pretty massive step up, where if you actually posted the position, you'd pay a completely different rate. And I think a good starting point could be, if you're applying for this job and you get the job, you earn the salary that goes with the job. Your old job is just information, like a CV. And you're not, you know, anchoring back to this. I wonder if a little bit of the pay gap has come from that. Whereas, you know, if you're hiring in from the outside and it just happens to be a male, then it's at a different pay rate already. Does that make sense?
Makes total sense. I have a follow-up question, but I wanted to say to the audience, if you have any questions, please submit them, and I will bring them up as we go along. Just following up on that point, we are losing a lot of talent by not doing exactly that. And I don't think it's laziness, right? People are going to other companies. It's because they're going to be paid more, and you can get someone in potentially cheaper who you can promote. So how do you make that work from a business point of view?
Well, it's interesting. I think that, you know, obviously being thoughtful about compensation and rewards and benefits, and there's more than to compensation than pay. There's, you know, flexibility and all those things. Those are important factors. But you know, companies go through thick and thin, and your ability to retain people, I think, anchors a lot more to that feeling of purpose and meaning and contribution than I think we're fortunate to think this for our own company, than the money in and of itself. So I think the more that you do to engender a community in which, you know, you're really engaging people and motivating them and rewarding them in cerebral and other ways, I think goes a long way to help that. But it really goes down to programs. Again, you know, one of the points you made is you can't just, you know, have a diverse slate and happen to, you know, tilt your hiring in one direction or another. It requires a whole ecosystem and a whole program. It's something that is an ongoing effort. It's not a project that's a one and done. It's an ongoing effort. There have to be programs that nurture it, and things that you do to consistently and continuously encourage this, sort of profile within your organization.
And it's one which evolves as well, because we found when we started 9 years ago, we were a young startup, a lot of millennials, and then as you progress the organization, the median age seems to change as well. So obviously, people have got slightly different, kind of outlook on life and objectives. So you can't, as I said, oh well, I do that, and then I stick to that. You've got to change and take account of your changing workforce as well. Mm-hmm.
Got a couple of questions coming in, which are along similar themes around values and culture. And so, Pip, because they're based on recruitment, I'd love to come to you first. What are the best means you've used or seen in hiring for value fit, not culture fit?
I think the most important thing, firstly, is to define your values. I think a lot of companies don't even have the values. So the companies I've seen that have done this best have actually screened for values fit before they get into deeper interviews. And so I'll give you an example. One of our values at the Dots is positivity. You can tell by my smile. I don't mean positivity for positivity's sake. I'm talking about hiring people that are focused on solutions, not problems. We then have a series of questions that check for that. And so, for example, one of those questions is, how would your friends describe you? Now, it's amazing to hear the response to that kind of question. You can get a good feel for someone's character that way. So we've basically been very careful to define our values and what kind of binds my team together, and then to have questions that basically get out, is that candidate going to match those values? They might be better at somewhere else. And so the first thing we do is a values screen. And where we've made mistakes in the past is actually hiring someone who we thought was an amazing person, and we did the value screen later on, and I was like, oh, it'll be all right. That one values, it's not going to make a difference. And actually, they're the ones that didn't work out in the business. So I'd suggest screening for values up front.
Another question, as an all-female panel, what's the most powerful step you've seen a male leader take to support diversity in their workforce? Maybe to Catherine?
Oh, God, that's a difficult one. Well, I think, I believe in sponsorship. I've been lucky that in my career I've had sponsors, and I think that's quite important.
Can you define? I think that's really interesting. The difference between mentorship and
mentor is someone who is going to advise you about, maybe how to handle some problems or whatever, and handle situation. I think sponsor is someone, and I really think a mentor should be outside the organization and a sponsor should be inside. Sponsor should be someone who is going to build your brand and push you within the organization. So it's about building your brand and making sure that, helping you to build that brand, and so people are recognized and promoted.
Another question. We talk a lot about gender, ethnic diversity, but age diversity is becoming even of a bigger problem because the population in Western countries and even China now is becoming older, and we are still competing for young talent that work longer hours. What's the solution to this problem? Maybe Heidi, you were talking about 18 years at the company, but still being a relative newbie.
Absolutely. That was something we really needed to focus on from a diversity perspective, actually, was that sort of longer tenured balance with some of the younger talent. And one of the things that we did was go to, and it's something we've been doing for some time, is going to the universities and trying to recruit, directly out of the universities, and trying to get interest in some of the younger perspectives at the table, and we've had amazing contributions from some of the newer joiners within the firm. But equally, a lot of people say in finance that the issue is a talent pipeline. I would say that it's a bit of a misunderstanding about the talent pool that's actually really out there. But we are working with organizations like Girls Who Invest, Tech Bridge Girls. There are a lot of organizations that are really looking, in this case in particular, to target young women as they're going through their early parts of school and into university, and trying to expose them to finance and the different aspects of it, and train them and get them excited and encouraged about this industry. And I think that's really important as well, is to really nurture that from an early start all the way through. And internships and things like, we've done quite a few internships that have been really incredible. We've had women come in for 2-month period of time that have made incredible contributions to the firm. And then when they graduate, hopefully they'll be potential candidates for us. So that's the way we've sort of gone about it. And it's hard because we're very close to Silicon Valley. So we're competing, with the Googles of the world, frankly. And it's been a challenge, but we've managed to do it well.
If I can just add, I think it's quite important to look at age as well, because I think when I mentioned earlier when we started, it was a very young workforce, and we sometimes struggled a little bit. You know the millennial top problem, and I think when we started saying, well, we need to diversify, maybe introduce a few more slightly more mature, I think that really worked well, and I think it helps because I said, people need to support, maybe so people who are, a bit older might have a bit more life experience, and certainly I see it, I do a lot of mentoring personally, and I see that's where, I meet a lot of great people, but what they're missing is that life experience to approach and handle people, because until you've done it, often handling people is quite hard. So, to have that mixture is quite important.
A question around incentive plans, because I think this is quite an interesting one from Laurie. Are there any insights that you can share about the utility and structure of incentive plans that may be more fit for purpose to build diverse organisations for the long term?
I think one thing that's interesting is flexible working for mums and dads. I think what we sort of forget a lot of times is that there's lots of dads in the organization. And funnily enough, this was something something that I do at the Dots is we work off OKRs, not KPIs. Does anyone know what OKRs are? Yeah. So my key result as CEO is 10 out of 10 happiness for my team. It sounds a bit airy-fairy, but my team doesn't leave the Dots because they are happy there, and we're competing on something that's other than just pay. One of the things that's really interesting about, we do an anonymous survey that goes out once a quarter, asking how happy you come into the Dots, why are you happy coming to the Dots? And then I ask 3 questions. How can we improve the office to make you happier? How can we improve the product to make you happier? And what would you do as CEO? And what I found really interesting about that is I had flexible working for mums, but I didn't have it for dads. And I got called out in the survey, very rightly. That was my bias. So we introduced flexible working for dads. What is amazing is my engineers are a lot of fathers, and they just don't leave the Dots. And so if you're looking about being poached or teams being poached from other organizations, thinking about incentives that are not pay-based, but actually kind of personal base will help you retain talent.
Can you just define OKR?
Objectives and key results. They were invented by Intel, but made famous by Google. They're aspirational instead of KPIs, which are achievable. They're great if you're innovating or trying something new because you have no idea what you're going to hit with a KPI. So it's a bit of the principle, if you shoot for the moon, you'll land in the stars, or if you shoot for the stars, you'll land on the moon. Sorry, that's my dyslexia.
And final question around transparency of salaries. Quite different companies here. A creative organization, a relative startup, and a quite well-founded business. What do you think about transparency of pay? Should organizations have a transparent pay system or not? Catherine, maybe to you first.
Oh, that's always the challenging one. I think I found that these days, as I said, I'm a bit older than the average person here, and we didn't used to talk about salaries years ago. Now everybody knows everybody's salary, so I'm not too sure that it is already transparent. But the very fact, I think people are much more open about, talking about their own salaries.
I think that's an amazing point. You might not be transparent to your team openly yourselves, but they're talking to each other. I mean, that's basically the way, especially the younger generation, they swap notes. So I think if you think about it with that lens, if you're not transparent yourselves, you're not owning the communication. They're discussing it outside of work. So it's important to know that.
I mean, we just really take a lot of time to calibrate our ratings and really look at employees across the organization as a management team. So there's full transparency at the management team level across the compensation. We have not gone directly to openly sharing that information, but we really work very hard to make sure there's equity and fairness in the compensation structure. But that's probably going to change.
Okay, thank you so much. So to Catherine, Pip and Heidi, thank you very much, and thank you to all for listening.
Thank you.